Good afternoon and welcome to another Caseware webinar. Today we're bringing you part one of the common tagging errors a series of webinars. It's part one today. Part two is coming on the 24th of July. So we've got 45 minutes available to us to talk to you about common tagging errors. So today will include an introduction and an overview of tagging. My name's Tom Jeffrey. I'm one of the Education and Media Technicians here at Caseware UK. And I'm joined by Phil Reeves, who's also an EMT technician. Phil will be taking you through the presentation. We've also got Les Horsley, one of our consultants, hiding in the background. He'll be helping me monitor and answer your questions that will be coming in during the session. So talking of questions, we have got a couple of facilities for you. So you can, as usual, pop your questions in the question field in the GoToWebinar control panel, and that will come through to me and Les. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If we can't get back to you during the session, then we'll get back to you afterwards. We're also going to be producing a Q&A document, depending on what questions we have, and that will be published afterwards on the knowledge base, and that will be accompanying the recording of the webinar. We do also have the hand-raising feature, which we haven't really used in the past, but we are going to be trialing that at the moment. So if you wanted to ask your question live via your microphone, then just use the hand-raising feature, and we'll send you an unmute request, and then you can use your microphone to ask the question live. There'll be plenty of opportunities throughout the session to ask questions. So I'll pass you over to Phil, and we'll get started with the presentation.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. As Tom said, this is a two-part series. So today we're going to be going through just some of the common tagging messages and icons that you'll see mainly when you're generating the iXBRL. If I just bring up the agenda, we'll just bring that up onto the screen. We're going to start mainly with a tagging review overview. So we're going to have a look at the review functionalities available within the template, and then we'll have a look at those common messages that you might receive when you're going through and doing your iXBRL submissions. As Tom said, we'll have time throughout the session today for Q&A. So if anyone does have any questions, then you can jot them in the chat, the question field, or raise your hand, and we'll come to you during the breaks that we'll have for the questions. Now, just to start, just want to do an overview of the tagging element, the tagging review element of the toolbar. Now, as you'll notice on all files that you're doing iXBRL submissions on the left-hand side, you'll have a icon that just tells you the last time that a document was tagged. So this could be any time that you've tagged your file, the date will change, so it'll update that date depending on when you've applied your tags. And you'll also have a review function. Now, the review function we recommend you use whenever you do apply the auto tags to your file, or whenever you manually tag your files. The reason for this is just because it highlights which areas have been tagged, which areas haven't been tagged, using different color icons. Now, as you can see, this is just a standard statement of comprehensive income, and after the tags review has been applied, as you can see, it appears with green highlights just to tell you that this particular area has been automatically tagged by Caseware. The different colors that you'll see will determine different areas. So, for example, green will tell you that something has been automatically tagged. Or yellow might tell you that you've tagged custom content. Red will tell you that a tag has been removed. Now, in terms of tagging errors or tagging messages, the majority of them will appear when you go through and generate the iXBRL. Now, when you first generate, as we'll see, you get two different options, HMRC, and if you have available to you the company's house submission, you'll also get the option for company's house. Now, depending on the option that you select, you'll see a generate iXBRL message, which can be a taxonomy conflict. So it might be that you've selected the UK FRS 102 or UK FRS 101 taxonomy, but you're actually including a DPL in your accounts. So we'll see that an example of that during this webinar, or it could be to do with the account status. So it might be that you're looking to submit your iXBRL submission, but you haven't finalized the account, so you haven't included the dates in the completion section. Again, that can cause issues when you go to generate the iXBRL. Now, other areas that we'll look at include the XBRL diagnostics. So as you can see on the screen, the XBRL diagnostics will highlight 3 different types of warning messages. The first one will relate to specific tagging errors. So this could be when you've got a issue with a tag, a context, or a numeric. And it may be that the tag, the context, or numeric is incorrect for the item that you're tagging. And again, we'll see an example of this. Where you see a specific tagging error, you won't actually be able to progress to generate the instance document. So these ones are extremely important that you rectify before you look to generate the instance document. The second type of message you might receive is just a warning triangle. Again, we'll see an example of this. This is generally as a result of maybe a missing data, or it could be that you've got a duplicate tag. So if you've got 2 items that are tagged similarly, then this warning message might appear. And again, we're going to see an example of that during today's webinar. The final one is information. Now, whenever you see this information icon, you can just ignore it. It's just providing you details. So this could be to do with duplicate numeric items. So in this example, we've got the reporting currency flipped value is a duplicate of the reporting currency. So because the 2 numerics are basically the same, you get just an information icon to inform you of that. Now today what we're going to focus on mainly is, as I said, the duplicate tags and mandatory tags. So mandatory tags is something we get a lot of calls on in our support department, especially because they flag up with quite a few warning messages when you go through and generate the instance document. And it can be, to some of our clients, it can be a little bit frustrating or scary to see that many red errors, but it's never anything to worry about too much, and we'll see how you can rectify that issue. And as always, Tom has kindly created a good handout for us today. So we've got links to 2 of our knowledge-based articles and also a getting started guide. So our iXBRL getting started guide that we're going to provide you with. Tom, if you can just send over that handout to all the delegates, then we'll get started. Now, just before I go into an example, we just want to raise a quick poll. So I'll just hand you over to Tom to raise our first poll.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, so the handout that Phil just mentioned is in the handout section of the control panel there. You should be able to see that as a PDF, knowledge-based links. That's got the 2 links to the articles that you see on the screen there at the moment, but it also has a link to the Getting Started guide, which is interactive. So that's a good starting point, or certainly a good refresher if you need to go through a top-level overview of the process. So in terms of the first poll that we have today, this is really just on the back of the first part of the webinar that Phil went through in terms of reviewing your tags. So I'll just pop that on the screen. So we'd just be interested to know at what stage you would ordinarily review your tags, whether you do, and certainly you're very welcome to expand on your answers in the question field. We'd love your feedback there. If you have any difficulty in answering the poll, then you can pop your answer in the question field. We know from previous feedback that if you are not clicking on the window that contains the poll, then it doesn't seem to allow you to interact with it. So we've got your answers coming in now. I'll leave it on the screen for another few seconds, but this will give us a picture of when you're reviewing your tags and how you can prevent a lot of these common errors coming up. So it looks like the majority of you have answered. So we're going to close the poll there. And as I say, if you don't get a chance to submit your answer before I close it, then you can put your answer in the question field. I'll close that and we'll just share the results on the screen. So it looks like you've got 67% of those that answered saying after auto tagging, 19% after manual tagging, 23% after completion, also 15% saying none of these. If that's because there's another stage where you're doing it, then please pop it in the question field so that we can use that as feedback. Thank you. So I'll pass you back to Phil.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you, Tom. So for those of you that don't review your tags at all, then feel free to let us know, or if you review them at another earlier stage or a later stage, then again, please let us know in the question field when you tend to do that. We generally recommend that you review your tags after each of these stages. So after you apply the auto tag, if you are doing any manual tagging, again, we recommend that you review the tags, and also after you put the dates in. A lot of our clients like to tag the accounts and then put the dates in, but it's always best to review the accounts at each stage so that you can ensure that everything is tagging correctly. Now, as you can see, I've opened up a set of accounts, and we've got on the right hand side, we've got the date that these were last tagged is actually earlier today. And the first thing I would always recommend is, as I've just applied these auto tags, is just to review the set of accounts. So I'm just going to click the review function just so we can see just what you would expect to see when you go through and apply the auto tags. Now, what you'll notice on this set of accounts is that there are a couple of manual tags that we've applied. Again, this is more for the demonstration purposes, but we'll be able to see how they appear in the review. So as you can see here, anything that's appearing in green will be automatically tagged. If I go down to the creditors note, you will see that this area here appears in yellow. Now that would tell us that this is a custom row. So what we've done is we've inserted a row for the director's loan account, and we split that figure out from the other creditors. The other thing just to note that this stage of detailed profit and loss account is not tagged. The reason for that is we've only selected the UK FRS 102 taxonomy and not the taxonomy that includes the DPL. This is something that is quite common, and we do get some support calls on that, people selecting the incorrect taxonomy, and that can sometimes cause iXBRL messages to appear when you're generating your instance document. Now, once you've reviewed the tags, you don't need to turn that off to be able to generate the instance document. You can just go straight to generate iXBRL on the toolbar here. So if I select to generate the iXBRL, what we're going to just go through is just some of the common messages that you'll see that catch out some of our clients when they're looking to generate the iXBRL. Now, the first screen that you'll see will just show you the two different export types that you have available. So you have Companies House or HMRC. If you don't have Companies House filing, then it will just jump to the next screen that we'll see when we click HMRC. At this stage, if I click Companies House, this is where Caseware will do its initial overview of your accounts to produce any potential critical warnings that would stop you from generating an instance document for Companies House submission. So in this case, as you can see, we've got two red warning X's, and these are essentially telling us that we can't progress past this point because the option to file with the regulatory bodies has not been selected, and also we haven't finalized our accounts. Now, if this is the case, you would need to go back, and as we'll see in a minute, you'll need to go back into the completion section and just select the appropriate options. And you would have to do that before you were able to progress any further than this point. If I go back and select HMRC, what you'll see is that it will actually let us progress because these are diagnostic warning messages. The export can continue if we tick the box on the left-hand side. Now, if I was to tick both of these boxes, you'll see that there's a forward button appear, and I can progress past this point. The reason for this is that HMRC, or we will let you generate an instance document without the detailed profit and loss version. Even though there is a detailed profit and loss, it will just exclude those tags from the instance document. Now, the best practice at this stage, and what we would always recommend you do, is just close this, and if you've got a detailed profit and loss, to apply the correct taxonomy. So I'm just going to go back. click our taxonomy drop down and just select UKFRS 102 with DPL. This will bring up the message that will just ask you to switch to the DPL version of the UKFRS 102 taxonomy. And if you select yes, that will load in the new context. Now this process, depending on the speed of your laptop, can take anything from between a couple of seconds to say 30-40 seconds. But as that loads in, what you'll notice is that if I was to run the review immediately after loading in the correct taxonomy, it wouldn't tag the detailed profit and loss, because what you'd need to do is just apply the auto tags again. Now, if I click the apply auto tags, again, I select the prompt to say, yes, I want to do that. All that's going to do is just perform some pre-tagging checks, and then it's going to load a box up that is going to tell us that we need to add in some new tags. So these new tags, again, obviously will relate to the detailed profit and loss. And as you can see, that screen's now loaded up. And what you can do is you can choose to go through, and we would recommend that you review the tags that are being added in. But in this case, there are 3,516 tags to be added. And I'm sure we don't want to go through and just click add tag on every single one of those. So you can click the option to apply the same action to all the tags. So I'll tick that box, click the add tags option. We'll also choose to retain any custom tags that have been added, and that will go through and tag our detailed profit and loss. Just whilst we're waiting for that to load or auto tag our detailed profit and loss, Tom, have we had any questions at this stage?
We have actually had a question come in, which I think you're going to be covering shortly, but it's we can see at the top of the screen there you've got a taxonomy year, and the question was, is the taxonomy year selection important?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so the taxonomy year is based on the end date of the period of your account. So if I click the taxonomy year on here, I've only got the option for 2019. If I had a file that ended year end 31st of December 2018, I would have the option to load in the 2019 taxonomy or the 2014 taxonomy. There was an update to the FRC taxonomy recently, so all the taxonomy year option is just allowing you to do is pick between the taxonomy years. But again, this is based on the year end of your file. So if you've got any 2019 year end files, any 2020 year end files, they're just going to give you the one option for the 2019 taxonomy year.
Excellent, thanks, Phil. That's all we've got at the moment, but we'll let you know if we get anything else come in.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, so at this stage, we've gone through and we've tagged the detailed profit and loss. So if I go back to generate our iXBRL screen and click HMRC, what you'll see is that DPL message has now been removed. What we have got is the one for the accounts completion. For now, I'm just going to select to ignore that message. We'll come back to that once we've gone through some of the other messages that you might receive. So I'm going to click forward, and at this stage, it's just a case of selecting where I want to save my iXBRL document. So this is the HTML that will be created from the instance document. So I'm just going to give this a name, call this webinar version 1, and click save. Now if you're going to go through, and in this case there will be error messages, so if you do get error messages, we just recommend that you maybe name it the name of the company in version 1, or so that if you are to create another instant document, you can call the second one version 2, just for version control. And at this stage, I'm just going to click the cloud button to begin the export. Now again, the export process, depending on how big your accounts are, can take anything from between a couple of seconds or say a minute. a minute or two. Obviously, with larger IFRS files, there's a lot more included in the file, so there's a lot more that it needs to generate. And it'll also depend on the speed of your machine, and for some reason mine has suddenly decided to poke through with the messages. Now, in this example, what we can see is, if I just make this just a touch smaller, as we can see, there are all three of the examples that I mentioned during the start are appearing on the screen. Now, the red one is the critical warning message, which is telling us that an item representing information as a specific date is using a context associated with a duration. Now, because of this error message, I'm unable to go through. So you can see the export button is grayed out. I can't go any further than this. And I can't go through and generate the instance document. To resolve the issue, you don't have to close out and go back through and find where the error message is. You can just click correct. And what that will do is that will take us down to where the issue is arising, which in this case is our custom line on the creditor's note. So it's to do with our director's loan account. Now, this particular message is just because this particular note is a balance sheet note. Obviously, creditor's note is a balance sheet note, and the balance sheet is obviously as at a specific date, so the period end date. So what it's expecting to see is a context that relates with an end date. And as you can see on the iXBRL document tagging window that has opened up, the context in this case is the current active period. Now, because this is for a specific date, we want to change this. This context should be current active period end date. So Caseware will load up a message if a custom line or a custom tag that you've created yourself is using the wrong context. It will flag that up. But it's just best to note that if it is a balance sheet item that you're manually tagging, that it should be active period end date. And if it is a profit and loss item, then you can use the current active period. So all I'm going to do is just select the current active period end date context. The rest of the information is correct. So I can just click OK. And once that loads through, that should clear that error message, which would then let us go through and export. Now at this stage, what we can see is I've got two warning messages. These are essentially due to the fact that my director's loan account, and unfortunately we can't see the other creditors line, it's just above that, but the other creditors line are using the same tags. So they're both tagged as other creditors. So if I was to select correct here, what it's going to tell me is that we've got the 3,774 from the director's loan account and a separate 12,000. So if I was to click go to tag, that will bring up the line. So now we can see it. So we've got both of those figures attached to the same tag within the taxonomy. Now this is quite common, especially if you're splitting out figures. It's not uncommon for you to use the same tag for multiple items. Now in this case, what you could do is you could go to the tag as I just did to show the line, and you could change the tag for one of the items. But in this case, they're both included on the other creditor's figure within the trial balance. It's just where we split them out on the notes. So what I'd want to do is just select to add values together for this tag. And all that will do is add the 12,422 and the 3,774 together. And essentially that will mean that both figures will be included when we go through and generate the instance document. Alternatively, you can choose to not export the tag, or you can use to select an individual value. What that will do is when I click that is we'll remove that message because we've rectified that issue, and then we'll have to do the same for the prior year. Now in this case, the prior year is appearing as 0 because there's nothing in there, but we've got the 7,110 from the director's loan account. So I could just select just to include the 7,110, or again, I can click to add them together. Now, once we cleared those warning messages, again, this information icon, we don't need to worry about, so we can just click export. Now, all that's going to do is that's going to collate all of the tags that we've applied so far, and it's just going to load up a export report. Now, in this case, we've got all these red messages, which is essentially going to stop us from filing this with HMRC. So we've got the message at the top, which is essentially just telling us that some compulsory information is missing. It's preventing us from filing this electronic set of accounts. Now, if you see these red warning messages, as I said, it's not anything that you really need to worry about. What we would recommend you do is just take a screenshot of them. But things like the entity trading status, account standards applied, these are all part of the mandatory tag section. So if I was to close this quickly and just access the bottom of the accounts, you'll see here this is the mandatory iXBRL tag section. Now, a lot of our clients like to tick the box that you can see on the right left-hand side because it avoids a white blank page appearing at the end of your accounts, which is great if you're going to send them off to the client. You don't really want a white page at the end of your accounts, or if they're being reviewed. But it must be unticked when you're exporting for iXBRL purposes. Otherwise, it doesn't pick up those tags. So just make sure that this is unticked. And then if I go back through and once again generate an iXBRL instance document, so again, I'll click HMRC. We'll ignore that again for now. I can click this icon, and for this one, I'm going to click the webinar version 1, but at this stage, we could call this, we could go through and call this webinar version 2. And I'll just click the export button. Now, one thing to note is that every time you go through and generate the instance document, the warning icons will appear. So if you were to make a mistake the first time, don't feel that you need to panic. You can just close out, cancel it. So if I was actually only meant to include this 12,422, but I click to add them together, don't worry too much. You can always go back, press cancel, and just go through the generate process again. For the second one, I'm just going to click export. I'm sure you've seen enough times now how to add tags together. But if I now go through and generate, because I've unticked that mandatory tag option, it has now reduced the number of error messages that I'm receiving down to 4. And they are obviously date authorized financial statements. You can see them on the screen, so I won't go through and read them all out. Now, these messages are essentially because of the fact that when we first clicked HMRC, you saw that I got that message that I ignored to do with the accounts completion. Essentially, I haven't put the dates for this set of accounts into the completion section. So before you look to submit your set of accounts to Companies House or HMRC, you need to make sure that you've got your dates from your client, the dates that they are signed. So if I close out of this now, just click Wizard and go to the completion section. You'll see that at this stage, the completion section we haven't filled anything out, and it is essential that this is done before you export the iXBRL, or before you create the instance document to send off to Companies House or HMRC. Now, the majority of the options here, if I click Final Accounts, it's going to automatically prompt me for the printed signatory dates and the printed dates. As you can see here, these two radio buttons are automatically selected. If you're filing with Company's House and you need the small filing copy, you can select the radio button here. And if you're filing with Company's House, you may or you will need to select file with regulatory bodies here. That will essentially just remove the shading, any shading that you've got, and also any lines from the cover page. Now we've selected the final accounts option, it's just a case of needing to insert your signatory date. So you get a little message that just says must be dated for the board approval. So if I just put some dates in, just say it was the same day. And because I'd already gone through and selected the signatures, we can see that these signature dates are already included. Now, if I go back to my financial statements, now we've included those dates, what you'll notice is that we've got the padlock icon on the right hand side. And if I go to the balance sheet or the director's report, so we'll go to the bottom of the director's report, you'll see our date is included here, as well as the person we've selected to sign off this director's report. Now, because we've now selected that in the completion section, these sections are now going to be included, or they are now going to be tagged. So we should, in theory, remove the error messages from the instance document. Now, one thing just to point out, there are signature options. So if you want to go through and put the date beneath the person who signed it, so I can click on the question mark icon and I can choose to print the date after the signature. And all that will do is just include the date beneath the signature name and the word director. Now, because we've gone through and completed that completion section, I can click generate iXBRL. And if I click Company's House at this stage, again, we're going to get error messages because we haven't selected to file with regulatory bodies, and also Company's House doesn't accept the detailed profit and loss taxonomy. So again, you do need to make sure that you've selected the correct options within the completion section, and also that you have selected the correct taxonomy. But if I select the HMRC option, you'll see that we've now got a tick. Caseware is happy with everything we've selected, the diagnostics passed, and we can proceed. Now, if I could proceed, I can go through and we can call it webinar version 3, and I can select to export. Now, again, as I said, we're going to get these warning messages, so we can just confirm whether we want to add the tags. I'm just going to click export this time because we don't need to see that for a third time. But you get the general gist. And when that loads up our export status, you should see, and as we can see now, the XBRL or iXBRL was generated successfully. And what we can do is we can choose to save all the facts to CSV, or we can view all the facts, which will just show a list of everything that we've tagged. So you can go through and review this if you need to. Or what you can also do is, if I just quickly open up if I quickly just open up the document manager, the file explorer, and just click on this HTML, what this will do is just create a HTML of the accounts and what you should expect to see. So in terms of the alignment, the fact that everything's on the right hand side, it will go through and look correct with Company's House and HMRC, but you can just review the figures and review the information that will appear in the accounts. Now, the final error message that I just wanted to make you guys aware of before we go for the final question section is just one that it will seem quite simple, but it is something that we do get calls on in our support department. And that is essentially when you do not have a registered number. So a lot of the time people may go through, especially on new files, and quickly skip through the wizard. So on the start section within the company details, this is where you would insert the registered number. Now, if you forget to insert your registered number and you go through and look to generate your iXBRL, whilst that won't flag it up at this stage, I'm just going to click webinar version 1 at this stage, and just click the cloud export button. Whilst it won't flag it up during the initial iXBRL diagnostics, what you'll get is a list of every single context in the file does not specify a valid entry. Now, the reason for that is the contexts are made up of, so if I was to click on one of these, is made up of a scheme and identifier. Now, the scheme and identifier are exactly the same for every single tag. So you never need to change them, but the identifier picks up as the registration number. So if you don't have a registration number in your file, there is no identifier, and you will just end up with a big long list of context errors. Okay, so one thing just to remember is just to make sure that you've got a registered number in the start section of the wizard before you look to create the instance document. So if I put that in registration number back in, we'll then be able to go through and generate the instance document again. Okay, so at this stage, that's all we wanted to cover for the initial part 1 of the common tagging errors or messages webinar. But Tom, do we have any questions regarding anything we've seen at this stage?
I feel, yeah, we have actually had quite a few questions and comments come in, so thank you for those. Majority of them, Les has swooped in there and answered very quickly, not even giving me a chance. But I'll just put a couple of them to you as well, because it may be useful to show them on the screen. One of the earlier questions we had was, how can we see how many tags there are in the file? Our answer, of course, included the diagnostics button. Perhaps you'd be able to show that on the screen.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So if I just return back to the Caseware file, so within the iXBRL toolbar, we have a button on the right-hand side, Diagnostics. If you select this option, the diagnostic tools from the iXBRL toolbar is essentially, or will essentially just show you a complete list. Not a complete list, but will total up all of the tags that are included in the file. So it will tell you how many of the tags are the standard Caseware auto tagged items, how many of them are custom content, how many tags have been removed. So essentially the color coding that I mentioned right at the start, it will go through and tell you. So in this case, we've got 8,116 items that match the Caseware standard tags. We're not missing any tags. We haven't changed any tags. We have got 3 library editions, so they will be any custom content that we've added in. So where I've added in our director's loan account line, that will just come through as library editions. So if you want to check just to see how many tags you've got in the file, it's just a diagnostic button on the right-hand side.
Excellent, thank you. I'll put a couple of questions to you before we move on to the final poll. So, can you use the small company filing for both Companies House and HMRC filing, or do you need full accounts for HMRC? That's from Alison.
For Companies House filing, you can select, so for Companies House filing, you can select the small company filing option. For HMRC, as far as I'm aware, and let's jump in if I'm wrong, for HMRC, you do need to file the full accounts. And the fact that Les hasn't jumped in, I would pretty much believe
I
that's
would
right.
agree with you totally there, Phil. So yes, that's correct.
So in terms of, I mean, we've got quite a lot of questions come in, so we'll certainly be producing a Q&A document. We've got a couple of you where I think it'd be more appropriate for us to, in the first instance, come back to you via email. We can have a conversation about that just to find out a bit more detail, and we'll also produce the Q&A. But the last question I was going to put to you before we move on to the poll is, can you lock the tags?
Yes, thank you. Yes, this is something that people aren't generally aware of, that this is an option. But if you go through and you apply your tags and you generate your iXBRL instance document and everything comes up successful, but it's not yet time to file the accounts. What you can do from within the document tab on CaseView is there's a lock icon here. So if we select lock, you do have an option to lock the XBRL tagging, and essentially that will stop anyone being able to go in and change any of the tags. You won't be able to apply the auto tags again. It will lock the tagging at the current state that the file's in. So it's just an option that you want to use, or that you might want to use if you're tagging the accounts and then you're going to be publishing, say, in a couple of weeks' time, just to make sure that no changes are made. Just before I hand you back to Tom, if on the questions, if anyone's got any questions about error messages that we haven't seen today, then feel free to send us a message and we can come back to you and we can look specifically at those tagging errors if there are errors that we haven't seen today.
Don't forget also we have got part 2. So this is part 1 of a 2-part webinar. So on the 24th of July, we can be armed with feedback and questions that you've sent us that we weren't able to cover during this session. So should we fire up the second poll, Phil, do you think?
Yeah, so just ahead of that second webinar that Tom has just mentioned, the idea of the second webinar is to focus very much on manual content. So things like related party transaction notes, controlling party transaction notes. These are areas that, especially on the FRS 102, 101 accounts, are just generally just manual green text boxes where you insert any information that you want, and you need to tag things like amounts owed to the related parties, or balances owed to the related party, or the name of the related party. And essentially what we want to do is just get an idea of what you guys would want to see us focus on during the second part of this 2-part series. So Tom, if you can load up the poll.
So that's on the screen now for you. As Phil said, this is going to help us. This will sort of help to inform the structure of part 2. So which of these notes requiring manual tagging do you use the most often? Controlling party notes, subsidiary undertakings, related party transactions, or other. If you have any others that you use more often than the other 3, then pop those in the question field and we can adapt our content to that feedback. So it looks like just over half of you have voted so far, but we'll keep it on the screen for a bit longer. We do have a clear winner actually, but I won't give away the answer just yet.
Is it controlling party, Tom?
It's I'll save the surprise. So okay. I'm going to close the poll now. I think we've got a good selection of responses there. And what we have is controlling party, 15% of you said controlling party, 21% subsidiary undertakings, related party, 61%. That's the one. And then other is 3%. And again, if you've put other, then please pop your expand on your answer, should I say, in the question field, and we can pick up on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Although we have obviously asked just so that we can have an area that we can focus on, we will still cover the subsidiary undertakings and the controlling party notes. So if those areas are things that you guys are interested in, we will still cover those. And for the 3% who said other, then as Tom said, please put those in the question field. If it's a director's report or any other part of the accounts, then we can look to incorporate that into part 2. I'm now going to pass you back to Tom just to finish off the webinar.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, so we're just about out of time actually, but we've just got a couple of bits to run by you to wrap up. So we've got lots of past webinar recordings and Q&A documents and things like that on our knowledge base. There's a wall of them there. You don't have to watch them all at once. And if you go to kb.caseware.co.uk, you'll see recordings of the webinars there. We're also in the process of uploading many of those to our YouTube channel. So that's Caseware Client Services. So that brings us to our upcoming webinars. This is an expanding list all the time. So if you keep an eye on our events page, caseware.co.uk/events, you'll see the full calendar there. At the moment, we've got the, I'll have to remember what was on that slide because I thank you. At the moment, we've got the, there's a cloud company audit Mercia template release webinar that's next week. That's on the 10th. We've got a cell calculations webinar as well. I know that we had one or two of you in the questions that were asking about cells and tagging and things like that. So I won't be covering tagging in that webinar, but certainly there'll be a more in-depth look at cells and calculations. And then we've got part 2 of this webinar, which is on the 24th of July. You can find all the agendas and the calendar for the full list of events on our events page, and you can sign up there as well. So that does bring us to the end of the webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much for the feedback. We'll get back to you with answers to your questions as soon as we can. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend. Take care.